The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump.
And we are ready to resume the fighting at any moment. Our finger is on the trigger.
It is very clear to me as a country which is relatively close to Lebanon that the Israeli offensive right now is completely counterproductive. And I do believe that if we want to talk about a complete ceasefire in the region, it needs to essentially extend to all theaters of operation.
Well, one could celebrate today the fact that the president of the United States didn't pull the trigger on destroying Iran's civilization as he had threatened to do. The fact of the matter is, at this current moment, it is unclear whether this so-called 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran will actually hold. In fact, Iranians announced that there had already been some violations of the ceasefire, and it looks like the Trump administration is now backing away from claims made yesterday in regard to accepting, or at least being open to, Iran's 10-point plan as the basis, the foundation of negotiations that are supposed to take place between the US and Iran later this week. So let's get into it, because I want to give you the details again as they stand right now. By the time we end the show today, I'm sure things are subject to change, but here's what we know, okay? There seemed to be some positive developments yesterday, as we shared on the program. However, according to the Associated Press, Iran's Supreme National Security Council said it has accepted the ceasefire and that it would negotiate with the United States in Pakistan beginning Friday. Neither Iran nor the United States said when the ceasefire would begin, and attacks took place in Israel, Iran, and across the Gulf region early Wednesday. Now, it's important to keep in mind that Israel was not privy to these negotiations between the United States and Iran. And if you were paying close attention to the Israel firsters on social media last night, it was abundantly clear that they were upset, to say the least, not very happy. And so Israel had continued taking strikes from Iran, right? Iran continued striking Israel. At the same time, there were some violations in terms of the ceasefire when it came to Iran's purposes. So Iran retaliated by striking some of the Gulf countries. But again, these strikes continue to some extent. Israel was continuing its attacks on Iran, said an Israeli military official who spoke on condition of anonymity. Iran also kept up fire on Israel. So every time Iran gets struck, bombed in any way, they retaliate. And so if they're taking hits from Israel, they're going to retaliate. And that's what they've been doing. But at the same time, Israel, again, was not privy to the ceasefire talks, which were mediated by Pakistan. The US military has halted, or this is according to the Associated Press, it's not entirely true, but for a brief period of time, the US military had halted all offensive operations against Iran, but continues defensive actions, said an official who spoke on condition of anonymity to describe sensitive military operations. So I'm going to pause for a second to just kind of discuss what is possibly going on here. When you look at the US weapons stockpile and the fact that we were incredibly low when it came to certain missiles that we need for a war like this, the fact that we had depleted missile interceptors to have some defensive capability in this war against Iran, there is a possibility that Trump both wanted to back out of what he had threatened to do against Iran, right? Which was to potentially deploy nuclear or unconventional weapons against Iran to, quote unquote, destroy their civilization. Their civilization will die tonight, as Trump had stated in one of his Truth Social posts. It's possible he wanted to find a way to wiggle out of that, which I commend him for, because using unconventional weapons or nuclear weapons against Iran would be horrible. There's also a possibility that the US knows that it is low when it comes to its weapons stockpile. And so maybe this is an opportunity for the US to replenish weapons, although that's incredibly difficult to do, considering some of the shortages we have in things like helium. Believe it or not, helium is necessary to build some of these weapons. And the war has destroyed helium plants and facilities across the Middle East, in Gulf countries, and in Iran as well. So congratulations, America. You're really knocking it out of the park, or hitting it out of the park. But there are just too many signs that, honestly, this ceasefire isn't even going to last long. Okay, so for instance, Iranian state TV reported just today that in violation of the ceasefire, US-Israeli forces targeted the Lebanon oil refinery on Lebanon Island. The president, safety and firefighting teams are working to extinguish the flames and secure the area. In fact, here's a little more detail on what Iran considers breaches of this so-called 2-week ceasefire.
These have reported an enemy attack on an oil refinery on Lebanon Island. The National Iranian Oil Refining and Distribution Company says it was hit at 10 a.m. on Wednesday. That's after the ceasefire was announced.
We know that so far Tehran has mentioned some cases of actually breach of that. In addition to the point that you mentioned on the attack in Lebanon, we know that Iran has also reported the downing of a drone in Fars province in the central area of the country today, and of course it is interpreting that and as another instance of breach.
Now, that report, of course, comes from Al Jazeera. And if those watching the program right now are wondering, why are you using a news organization based out of Qatar? Well, I would use US media if they did a decent job in covering what's going on right now. CNN at the moment is too busy doing their 50th segment on Hassan Piker. But I digress. So there also seems to be some confusion among the Trump administration about the ceasefire they agreed upon. So Trump wrote on Truth Social that numerous agreements, lists, and letters are being sent out by people that have absolutely nothing to do with the USA/Iran negotiation. In many cases, they are total fraudsters, charlatans, and worse. He continues in his Truth Social post to write that there's only one group of meaningful points that are acceptable to the United States, and we will be discussing them behind closed doors during these negotiations. These are the points that are the basis on which we agreed to a ceasefire. It is something that is reasonable and can easily be dispensed with.
Did you know that the average employer has to sift through about 250 resumes just to find a single job? It's an insane amount of work and honestly a huge waste of time. Well, if you're hiring, here's good news. You can now review all those resumes and applications faster thanks to ZipRecruiter. We use them. ZipRecruiter has a new feature that instantly shows you the most interested qualified candidates first. And today you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/TYT. Look, their matching tech is so good that it finds the qualified people for you. But this new feature is a game changer. It actually bumps the candidates who are really excited about your job right to the top of the list. You even get a feel for their personality because they can tell you in their own words why they want to work for you. No wonder they're the #1 rated hiring site. Cut through the standard and get to the standouts with ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/TYT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TYT. Meet your match on ZipRecruiter.
Okay, so he didn't clarify which meaningful points he was referring to here. However, this is what Trump wrote on Truth Social last night, because I think it's important to remind you all what Trump had said and what he appeared to agree on last night as this, very fragile ceasefire was announced. He said that we received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States as president and also representing the countries of the Middle East, it is an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. So at no point in that statement did President Donald Trump raise any issues with the 10-point plan that was offered up by the Iranians. Nonetheless, I want to read that to you, what the 10 points contain. And then we'll get to what the possible confusion can be. So this is a screenshot from Trita Parsi's piece on the ceasefire. He listed the 10 points, and I want to read them to you right now. The US must fundamentally commit to guaranteeing non-aggression. That's going to be very difficult for the US, as we all know. Continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. A lot of people salty about that, but it was always in Iran's 10-point plan. Acceptance that Iran can enrich uranium for its nuclear program. Pay close attention to that point in particular. Removal of all primary sanctions on Iran. This is something that Iran has been wanting from the very beginning. The sanctions that have been implemented against Iran were meant to cause an uprising among the Iranian people, which is how the protests in late December, early January began. It was about economic frustration, not about regime change. Those demonstrations, which were, again, caused by US sanctions against Iran, were then co-opted by the Israelis and Mossad, essentially agitating, which then led to mass killings, right? And so I don't buy, I certainly do not buy the casualty numbers that are being regurgitated by monarchist propagandists here in the United States. They claim that 35,000 people had been killed. I don't believe the IRGC's numbers either, right? I believe numbers that have been confirmed with the names of the individuals who have been killed. And that's somewhere, I'm gonna say roughly 6,500 people were killed, which, by the way, is bad enough. But you have to understand how those protests started, why they started, what the real reason was, and more importantly, how those protests were co-opted by bad actors who couldn't care less about the well-being of the Iranian people. I mean, just take a look at what's happening right now in Iran, what happened during the several weeks that this war has been going on. How many Iranians have been slaughtered as a result of this war? And you're gonna tell me that the Israelis care about the well-being of the Iranians? They literally destroyed a Jewish synagogue in Iran. And by the way, took full responsibility of it. I was listening to interviews of some of the, Jewish individuals who would go to that synagogue, and they said, yeah, we're not surprised that Israel did this. They've been very hostile toward us because we're anti-Zionists. So that goes back to the argument that I've been making from the very beginning when people try to label critics of Israel as anti-Semites. Zionist ideology is a political ideology. It is not an identity. Okay, Jewish people must be protected. Jewish people as a group are not guilty of anything. But the nation state of Israel, its government, its military, and the political ideology of Zionism absolutely should be called out, especially considering all the bloodshed it has led to. Okay, let's get back to this 10-point plan. So again, acceptance that Iran can enrich uranium for its nuclear program, removal of all primary sanctions on Iran, removal of all secondary sanctions against foreign entities that do business with Iranian institutions, end of all UN Security Council resolutions targeting Iran, end of all IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency resolutions on Iran's nuclear program, compensation payment to Iran for war damage. So they want reparations for all the damage that we have done, that Israel has done when it comes to their own country, withdrawal of US combat forces from the region, ceasefire on all fronts. This is also important, including Israel's conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, according to the Associated Press, apparently there were some translational differences, and maybe that's the heart of the disagreement here. So the version in Farsi included the phrase acceptance of enrichment for its nuclear program. But for reasons that remain unclear, that phrase was missing in English versions shared by Iranian diplomats to journalists. That's what the Associated Press is claiming, okay? That's the only area in which I can see a miscommunication here. However, Trump has put out a statement claiming that the US is working closely with Iran to ensure that there will be no enrichment of uranium and that we will dig up and remove, with the help of Iran, all the deeply buried nuclear dust. So he's referring to the enriched uranium that I believe, and this is my speculation, I believe that there was a special operation taking place deep within Iran to retrieve that enriched uranium. I believe that special operation went wrong. We lost a bunch of aircraft, military aircraft as a result. And then, Trump can't ever admit defeat. So I believe that they used that disastrous incident to claim that they had heroically saved a member of our military, right? That troop, that pilot that was allegedly missing. I don't know what the reality is. All I know is I don't trust the narrative coming out of the Trump administration because they have been lying to the American people about this from the very beginning. I'm not going to take the IRGC's word for it either. However, when you take a look at how many soldiers were in the area, how much we had in terms of aircraft and military assets in the area, right? This mountainous region, it seems like they were there to try to retrieve the enriched uranium, which is so stupid. It's so stupid because it's all a cover story. The enriched uranium, the nuclear program, it's always just been a cover story because this whole war, for Israel's purposes, has always been about regime change and nothing more. So, and of course, the way Israel tends to get what they want is they play the role of, oh my God, we're so scared. Oh my God, we're in a hostile region. Oh my God, we keep stealing land and encroaching on other people's borders and bombing our neighbors and everybody hates us. So we got to make sure we get that enriched uranium. In reality, they wanted to do to Iran what was done to Libya and Syria. But Iran is a different country, okay? And they ain't playing. They had been prepping for this war for literally decades. And they were hiding their cards to some extent. We didn't know. We knew that they had military capability. We didn't know the extent to which they had military capability because they had been so restrained in, previous elements of this war, right? When the US attacked Iran's nuclear sites during the 12-day war. I mean, Iran really didn't retaliate the way that they could have, which made people question, well, do they really have the capacity to cause significant harm with their military? And it turns out, yeah, they do. And by the way, every time Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth claims that, oh, we have just destroyed Iran's military, we have depleted their weapons, they're done, Iran ends up carrying out an attack that's pretty significant, okay? So that's why I don't really trust much of what comes out of the Trump administration when it comes to updates on this war. Now, Iran's 10-point plan says nothing about working with the United States in order to retrieve the enriched uranium. But I want to go to this next clip. Let's watch.
I've seen a lot of inaccurate coverage today from the media about these negotiations and these plans already. So let me be clear and correct the record. The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team. Many outlets in this room have falsely reported on that plan as being acceptable to the United States, and that is false.
So, completely different message from what we heard, what we read from President Donald Trump last night, where again, he claimed, okay, it's important to read it again, that they received the 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Now, all of a sudden, you have White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying, we throw it away, we trash it. I don't think that we are going to really get a ceasefire here. That is my prediction.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.